Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Ava Hill. I'm the elected chief and a Mohawk from the Six Nations of the Grand River Territory, which is surrounded by the settler state of Canada. I'd like to speak about some of the future work of the Permanent Forum post-2015. Six Nations is the largest populated Indigenous nation in Canada, with approximately 26,000 citizens. And we are left with less than 5% of the land holdings that were promised to us through treaty, which states, which them and their posterity are to enjoy forever. This was promised to us for fighting as allies alongside Great Britain throughout the American Revolutionary Wars and the War of 1812, long before Canada would become a settler state. We are a proud Iroquois nation with many successes, but also with many ills. We have unaddressed needs in education, training, and employment opportunities. In the last 10 years alone, 3,210 of our students were denied a post-secondary education as we are under-resourced to meet this need. Unemployment at Six Nations is recorded at 25%, with many giving up and turning to social assistance. While the lack of resources for training, education, and jobs are affecting our youth, Canada, the province of Ontario, and municipalities collect in excess of $4 billion annually in taxes and revenues from our original Haldimand Treaty lands of the Six Nations, lands which Canada has recognized as having legal liabilities owing to Six Nations by Canada, but they have refused to negotiate for just and equitable resolutions with us. Many more of the unaddressed realities facing our nation are outlined in Six Nations of the Grand River Shadow Report that was presented to the Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination in January 2012. Our Shadow Report corrected the misinformation in Canada's 19th and 20th reports to CERD. It is unfortunate, but most of the same issues we tried to bring forward in 2012 are issues continually being encountered by Indigenous peoples throughout Canada. In 1995, Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council had enough insults and lies from Canada, promising the honour of the Crown would be upheld and in good faith negotiations would occur. Instead, we were offered $113 per acre in a take it or leave it ultimatum as settlement offer on lands with a present day value of $10,000 per acre. Instead, we chose to go to court, seeking an accounting from Canada on what they did with all our Haldimand Treaty lands, being 950,000 acres, promised to Six Nations, which them and their posterity are to enjoy forever. We are also seeking an accounting for what they did with our natural resources and revenues from our lands, and a ruling from the courts to make the trust whole again, for which they cannot account for as being legally transacted. As recent as December 2014, Canada and its representative undermined our efforts to return to the negotiating table to address our land rights issues in a fair and just manner. Canada's reasoning being the size of Canada's legal liabilities owed to Six Nations. Canada's claim process is limited to address claims under $150 million, and you must extinguish your children's rights to the lands. We have nowhere to go for negotiations. And yet Canada stands before the world professing to be honourable and practicing in good faith negotiations and resolving land disputes with the Indigenous peoples of Canada. That is not true. So here the Six Nations of the Grand River stands before the United Nations once again at the 14th session of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, plagued by much the same issues facing our nation and the challenges we faced throughout the past 40 years. We are seeking justice for our people's land rights with the settler state known as Canada. At the very least, you will have heard our story once again, and we leave you with some positive recommendations on how justice can best be served for addressing the Six Nations of the Grand River's land rights. 1, the extinguishment requirement of our children's rights to our lands must cease as a prerequisite for resolving these issues. 2, Canada cannot pay the true cost of resolving our land rights issues. Therefore, Canada must be prepared to discuss a resolution based on the terms of our 1784 Haldimand Treaty as granted. Canada must commit to long-term arrangements honouring these terms. Canada and Ontario need to implement domestic legislative changes to allow for supplemented transfer payments directly to Six Nations from the wealth Canada, Ontario, municipalities and the private sector collect from within our 1784 Haldimand Treaty lands. The return of lands must also be included in Canada's and Ontario's mandate as required by Section 28.2 of UNDRIF. To achieve these objectives, Six Nations, Canada and Ontario need to formalize a joint work plan with short but realistic timeframes. The use of mediators with appropriate mechanisms for dispute resolution are required to ensure good faith negotiations are practiced by all. There needs to be options to go to neutral dispute resolution tribunals to resolve legal disagreements should impasses happen. The neutral tribunal will have the authority to make binding decisions on the validity of issues, compensation criteria, and innovative means for resolving issues. We call upon the Permanent Forum to establish an international tribunal to oversee resolutions to these issues. Progress on these negotiations shall be reported directly to the Permanent Forum, the Parliament of Canada, and the Parliament of Canada through a special joint Six Nations Parliamentary Committee. These efforts must start immediately. Yawa.